at the very rim of existence where the logic of the map ends and the silence of the void begins. Antarctica, a home at the end of the Earth. Here, the planet itself seems to lose its footing, surrendering its colours and its heat to the absolute white. Dissolving into a vertical architecture of frozen walls and restless sapphire seas. Stretching across 5.5 million square miles, this colossal ice sheet is larger than the United States and Mexico combined. It holds nearly 90% of the Earth's ice. Yet for all its staggering proportions, it remains a continent of ghosts. A land so profoundly desolate that it hosts no permanent human residence. To the west, the Antarctic Peninsula reaches out like a fractured limb. A jagged labyrinth of caving glaciers and narrow mist-heavy fjords. To the east, the interior rises into a high wind scoured plateau, where the air is so cold and dry that time itself appears to have frozen in place. Even now, in the 21st century, Antarctica remains the only place on our planet that refuses to be tamed. Nature rules here with a cold, geometric precision indifferent to the ambitions of men. And as we move deeper into the heart of this frozen desert, the familiar world of life and sound begins to fall away. Colossal ice shelves fracture with a thunderous roar, surrendering shards the size of cities to the southern tide. This journey of discovery will take us from the volcanic shores of the South Shetlands to the absolute stillness of the geographic South Pole. From the teeming wildlife of the coast through the ancient airless valleys of the interior. To finally understand that this is not just a wasteland of ice. It is a sacred repository of the Earth's history, and a mirror reflecting our own fragile place in the universe. The silence of the open Southern Ocean is broken not by ice, but by the jagged, dark remains of a history we would often prefer to forget. As we cross the violent threshold of the Drake Passage, the horizon finally yields to the South Shetland Islands. A chain of volcanic outposts that serve as the front porch of the Antarctic. But one among them stands apart, shrouded in mist and mystery. This is Deception Island. From a distance, it appears as a solid fortress of rock and snow. But as our vessel approaches a precarious gap in the cliffs known as Neptune's Bellows, the landscape reveals its true hollow nature. We are sailing into the very heart of a restless volcano. Stepping onto the shore at Whalers Bay, the air carries a weight that is both visceral and haunting. Here, the frozen purity of the continent is scarred by the skeletons of the early 20th century. Rusted cavernous boilers and decrepit wooden barracks lean precariously against the wind, silent witnesses to an era key. This sheltered harbour was the epicentre of a brutal whaling industry. Thousands of blue and fin whales were brought into these waters, their lives rendered into oil to light the cities of a world thousands of miles away. It is a landscape of industrial ghosts where the salt air has chewed through iron and the wood. The very humans who came to exploit this frontier were ultimately driven out by the same earth they stood upon. But the true deception of this place lies beneath your boots. As you walk along the waterline, the expected white of the Antarctic is replaced by a sooty obsidian black. These are volcanic sands, and they hold a secret that defies the logic of the latitudes. Reach down and touch the water where it laps against the shore, and you will find it is not freezing, but shockingly warm. Clouds of sulphurous steam rise from the damp earth, swirling through the sub-zero air like phantoms. This is where geothermal fire meets glacial ice. The island is a caldera, a massive volcanic crater that collapsed in on itself 10,000 years ago, allowing the sea to flood the interior. The mountains surrounding us are not just peaks, but the rim of a giant sleeping bowl. The geology here is a study in instability. While much of the Antarctic feels permanent and unchanging. Deception Island is a reminder of the Earth's hidden volatility. Beneath the layers of ash and ice, magma still pulses, occasionally waking to reshape the bay with eruptions that have occurred as recently as the late 1960s. It is a place that challenges our perception of the South as a static frozen wasteland beneath us. Instead, we find a laboratory of extremes, where life must adapt to both the crushing cold of the atmosphere and the searing heat of the soil. As the steam clears to reveal the towering ice-draped walls of the caldera, we realise that we have passed through the gates, the familiar world is gone. And the mysteries of the deep interior are now calling us further south, toward the true heart of the ice. As we drift further south along the western spine of the continent, the world begins to tighten into a corridor of staggering verticality. This is the Lemaire Channel, a narrow passage barely 7 miles long, hemmed in by sheer cliffs that rise over 3,000 feet straight from the water's edge. It is often referred to as the Kodak Gap. Not merely because of its cinematic perfection, but because the scale here is so overwhelming it demands to be documented even as it defies capture. In this narrow strip of indigo water, the indigo is punctuated by icebergs that carry a hue that feels almost artificial. an electric crystal in blue. This isn't a trick of the light, it is the visual signature of immense pressure and vast spans of time. For thousands of years, layers of snow have fallen on the interior, each pressing down on the one below until every air bubble is squeezed out of the structure. When light enters this dense crystal, the long red wavelengths are absorbed, leaving only the brilliant shortwave blue to reflect back to us. You aren't just looking at eyes. You are looking at the physical weight of centuries. On the rocky outcrops and low-lying islands that line the peninsula. The profound isolation is broken by the frantic, busy energy of life. Here, the Gentoo penguins are the true masters of the terrain. Recognisable by the vivid orange of their beaks and the white bonnet patches atop their heads, they are the fleetest of the brush-tail species, capable of reaching speeds of 22 miles per hour once they hit the water. On land, however, they're a steady and persistent struggle. They navigate penguin highways, deep and well-worn grooves in the snow carved by thousands of tiny feet over the course of a breeding season. They are remarkably focused, oblivious to the grandeur of the mountains above them. Driven by the singular urgent necessity of the southern summer. But this abundance of life draws a silent, lethal presence to the edges of the ice floes. A leopard seal, sleek and serpentine, patrols the shadows of the birds. It is an apex predator of the southern pack ice. Possessing a reptilian gaze and powerful specialised jaws. To see one lounging on a raft of ice is to witness a creature of perfect adaptation. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. In this theatre of survival, the playfulness of the gentle colony is constantly balanced against the cold reality of the hunt. There is no malice here, only the raw, unblinking mechanics of an ecosystem that operates at the very limit of what is possible. The silence of the channel is never truly absolute. Occasionally, the air is shattered by a sound known as ice thunder. It is the sharp, explosive crack of a glacier cavern. A massive block of ice, perhaps the size of a city block, fracturing under its own weight and plunging into the sea. The resulting splash sends a slow, heavy ripple through the water. A reminder that the peninsula is not a static postcard, but a living, breathing system. As the echoes fade into the granite walls, a sense of deep reverence takes hold. We are witnesses to a world that does not need us. A place where the dance between ice and life has continued in perfect frigid harmony long before we arrived, and will likely continue long after we are gone. This is the majesty of the peninsula, a fragile, fleeting paradise at the end of the map. Leaving the peninsula behind and pushing further south, the landscape undergoes a subtle but profound transformation. The mountains grow taller and the ice shelves become thicker. The air carries a clarity that seems to sharpen the very edges of reality. We are entering the Ross Sea, the most southerly body of water on the planet. A region that anchors the mythic weight of Antarctica. Emerging from the white horizon is a majestic sight. Mount Ararat stands at nearly 12,000 feet. A massive ice-clad sentinel in the frozen waste. The southernmost active volcano on our globe. Internal fire refuses to be extinguished by the ice. At its peak, a permanent lava lake roars a cauldron of liquid fire and glowing surface, and pulsating red remains visible for miles in the twilight. This is the extreme terminus of the Ring of Fire. For thousands of miles, this tectonic seam has birthed the volcanoes of Japan, the Cascades, and the Andes. But here, it meets its final and cold destination. The contrast is visceral to the human senses, nestled at the foot of this volcanic giant. McMurdo Station is a cluster of wind-beating buildings. The primary gateway to vast frozen interior. In Antarctica's closest thing to a bustling capital city, it operates on a logic foreign to our world. On the dark, volcanic soil of Ross Island, commerce and nationality fade into the distant background. McMurdo is a hub of pure scientific inquiry, and researchers gather to decipher the secrets of the ice. They study the atmosphere and history of our planet. And a community built on the edge of the abyss. Sustained by a logistical miracle of ships and planes, they battle the most unforgiving weather on Earth just to deliver the basic essentials of life. But beyond the laboratories and the fuel tanks, a profound silence dominates. In the Ross Sea region, the sense of being an interloper is inescapable. This land has never known a permanent human footprint. A territory that exists outside the reach of any single government or crown. A vast, stateless wilderness protected by international treaty. And a sanctuary dedicated to science and global peace. To look out from the heights of Ross Island across the endless expanse of the ice shelf is to feel the true scale of the world. It is a place of absolute and total presence, where the ice does not simply exist, it reigns. In this theatre of fire and ancient frost, we are reminded that human ambition is but a tiny moment on a much older, where the land carries the final and only word. A few miles across the volcanic rubble of Ross Island, the landscape offers a different kind of monument. Not a peak of rock or a lake of fire, but a small, unassuming wooden structure standing defiantly against the white void. This is Cape Royds, home to the Hunt. Built by Sir Ernest Shackleton during the Nimrod expedition of 1980. In a land where nature usually erases human presence within days, these walls have endured for over a century. Step inside, and the early 20th century hasn't just been preserved, it has been frozen in time. The air here is so dry and so cold that the usual mechanics of decay simply do not exist, creating a natural time capsule that feels unnervingly alive. Yet as you look out, the small frosted window toward the towering, indifferent mass of the Antarctic interior, the feeling of reverence shifts. You realise that these explorers weren't conquerors. In the traditional sense, they were guests of a continent that merely tolerated their presence. Deep within the interior, where the white architecture of the ice sheet finally yields to the dark, exposed bone of the continent, lie the McMurdo Dry Valleys. To the uninitiated, this is a landscape that feels like a glitch in the geography of the South. We are accustomed to thinking of the Antarctic, this land at the bottom of the world, as a monolith of ice. Yet here, across 15 square miles, the ground is bare, brown, and desolate. This is the driest place on Earth. A region where liquid water is a myth and snow is a transient stranger. The reason for this impossible dryness lies in the sky. Towering glaciers surround the valleys, but the moisture they carry never reaches the floor. Instead, gravity pulls cold, dense air down from the high polar plateau, creating katabatic winds. These are not mere breezes. They are atmospheric torrents that can accelerate to over 200 miles per hour. They act as a giant invisible abrasive, scouring the valley floors and evaporating every molecule of moisture before it can settle. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the dry valleys is its relationship with time. In most of the world, death is followed by a swift return to the earth. But here, the laws of biology are suspended by the climate. Scattered across the valley floors are the remains of those who lost their way. crab-eater seals that wandered miles from the sea only to be overtaken by the cold and the dry. Without moisture or bacteria to trigger decay, their bodies have not rotted. Instead, they have been mummified by the wind. Their skin turned to leather, and their bones held in a state of perpetual preservation. This is the surreal paradox of the South. We come to Antarctica seeking the ice, yet it is here in the absence of it that the continent reveals its most primal face. The dry valleys remind us that at the edge of the world, even the most basic elements of our existence, rain, soil, decay, are not guaranteed. It is a landscape of absolute purity. A place where the earth is stripped bare, reminding us that human presence is only one layer on a much older surface. Beyond the exposed bone of the dry valleys, we ascend toward the apex of the world, the East Antarctic ice sheet. This is not merely a landscape. It is a geological fortress. A massive dome of ice that reaches nearly 3 miles into the sky. As we move toward the centre of this wide expanse, the horizon flattens into a perfect unbroken line, and the air becomes so thin and pure that the very concept of distance seems to dissolve. We are standing on the most profound accumulation of fresh water on our planet Earth. A reservoir that holds enough mass to raise global sea levels by nearly 200 feet. But its true value is not measured in volume, it is measured in memory. In the heart of this frozen desert lies Vostok Station. It is a place that exists at the outer limits of human endurance, often referred to as the Pole of Cold. In July of 1983, the mercury here plummeted to negative 89.2 degrees Celsius. The lowest temperature ever recorded on the surface of the Earth. Scientists here have drilled deep into the white silence, pulling up cylinders of ice nearly 4 kilometres long. These ice cores are the black box of our planet. Sequestered within the crystal infrastructure are tiny pressurized bubbles of air. Primitive breaths taken by the Earth as far back as 800,000 years ago. By analysing these trapped gases, we can reconstruct the fever dreams of the planet. We can see the rise and fall of ancient ice ages, the shifting concentrations of carbon, and the slow rhythmic pulse of the climate long before the first human cities were ever imagined. This ice doesn't just hold the past. It archives with a terrifying, impartial accuracy. But the most staggering revelation of the East Antarctic interior lies even deeper. Beneath nearly 4,000 metres of solid ice under a pressure that should be crushing, Researchers discovered a miracle of geography, Lake Vostok. It is a subglacial lake the size of Lake Ontario. But it has not seen the light of the sun for at least 15 million years. Isolated from the rest of the biosphere by the gargantuan weight of the ice sheet above this liquid world has remained a secret. A pocket of ancient earth cut off from the passage of time. It is a dark, pristine environment where life, if it exists, has evolved in a silence so deep we can barely comprehend it. As the wind whistles across the flat white void of Vostok, we realize that the ice is not our enemy. It is our witness. It preserves what we have forgotten. As we continue our ascent toward the very center of the map, the horizon finally surrenders its last features. We have reached the convergence, the point where the imaginary lines we use to organize the world finally meet and disappear. This is the geographic South Pole. At 90 degrees south, the geography of the planet performs a final surreal trick. Every direction you look, every step you take is inevitably north. Here, the sun does not rise or set in the traditional sense. It makes a slow horizontal circuit around the sky, staying up for 6 months of brilliant unblinking day, then sinking into 6 months of absolute polar night. At this pinpoint on the globe, time itself becomes a local convention rather than a physical reality. You are standing at the junction of 24 time zones where you can walk through an entire day in a matter of seconds. Under the terms of the Antarctic Treaty, this land is owned by no one and shared by everyone. It is the only place on Earth where the pursuit of science and peace is the absolute law. Here, in the heart of the most inhospitable environment we have ever known, we find our most hopeful expression of collective wisdom. We realize that the end of the physical journey is only the beginning of a deeper awareness. That the world is not something to be conquered, but a fragile shared inheritance that demands our absolute respect. In the great white silence of the pole, we are reminded that when we reach the end of the Earth, we finally find our way back to our common humanity in